Hello? Can y'all hear me? Am I breathing heavily? I love the little fuzzy mold thing that goes on the end of this, so if I start like blowing out your ears, I apologize. It's coming out of my paycheck. I'm Ryan. I'm a senior here at Mizzou. I'm our campus ministry intern, which means I get to live in the church and work with college students. It's a great life. I want to welcome you all here tonight. Thank you for letting me speak with you. I'm really excited to be here. This is my second time speaking at E3 this year. The first time I spoke, I told a story about back when I was like in middle school, and I was a little band kid. It was a real awkward story. Good time. I'm not going to tell a story like that tonight. In fact, tonight's a little different. I'm going to have a talk with y'all that really might challenge some of you. But it's a talk that we think is absolutely necessary to have. So we're going to be talking about the culture of me that exists in our world, and more appropriately, how to move towards a culture of us. And that all might sound like a little vague, a little bit confusing, so I just briefly want to recap what brought us here. This is the second week of a 3-week series on Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si. An encyclical is just a really important piece of writing by the Pope. Pope Francis wrote this one a few months ago. Last week, Thomas dove in to the first part of that encyclical, its direct translation, "Praise be to you." And he talked about God's creation. He talked about how he's experienced the beauty of God's creation, especially in nature, with like mountains and waterfalls and little ants carrying flowers on their backs. Just talk about the beauty in all of God's creation and how we should care for our common home. And to do so, he used an analogy of this guy who was given a house for himself and his family. A bunch of volunteers came together, built this guy a home. And the man was so appreciative. He was just in like awe and wonder of this gift that had been given to him and to his children. But over time, that wonder faded. And before long, the man stopped caring for that gift he had been given until eventually the house fell into ruins. And it was condemned long before it ever should have been. And in failing to care for his home, that man failed not only himself, but he failed his children too, because they were also without a home. The effect of his carelessness far exceeded just himself. So it makes a little sense then that tonight we're going to be talking about me, about my role, and about how it affects all of God's creation, about how I am called to care for and love everyone in my common home. And I think it's important to note that things having to deal with me, the topic of me, they're not all bad things. This talk is not about like the culture of me and everyone just needs to like lay down their desires and their dreams and everything that's important to them for the sake of everyone else around you. That's not what we're talking about. In fact, I think that a true love of myself is crucial to appreciating God's creation. Which might sound a little bit selfish, but it's not. It's not. A love of myself is not selfish at all. And why not? It's because I am made by God. It's that simple. Thomas talked last week about God's creation being reflected in the beauty of everything around us, but it actually goes a step further than that. I am his creation too. We've heard it before. God formed each of us in his image and in his likeness. It means that he held a mirror up to himself and he saw me. And he saw you. So when I love myself, I directly love God. When I appreciate just how special and unique and like wonderful I am, I give praise to God for how special and unique and how wonderful he is too. And we're told that we ought to do more of that. In the Gospel of Matthew, the Pharisees, they came to Jesus and they were trying to trip him up, back him into a corner, and they said, "Jesus, what is the greatest commandment of them all?" He said, "You should love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind." When I love myself, I do just that. So this true love of self is actually something that's really important. Unfortunately, I think there's a lack of it in our culture. And that is what we're going to be talking about tonight. The culture of me is about a lack of real love for myself and for the people around me. I think what we sometimes experience rather than a true love of ourselves is an infatuation or an obsession with ourselves. When I care about my own desires, when I care about pursuing my own pleasures, what's going to satisfy me temporarily, which ultimately is never going to satisfy me in the end. We're made for each other. Whereas love points outward, in the culture of me, I'm placing what I want before everyone else. And we know that that, too, is good for nothing. God tells us over and over again in Scripture that we are made to be in unity with other people, not by ourselves. In fact, we're told this from the very beginning of time, the very beginning of the Bible, all the way back in Genesis. I don't know how many of you just sit around and peruse Genesis on your free time. Not one of them. So we're going to do a brief refresher course of what's in that passage. Way back in the beginning of time, Genesis chapter 1, God created all things, and he went all out on creation. I've actually made a short list of the things that he created for you. Day one is God created the heavens and the earth. Casual, I'm going to call it a day. And then the next day, the water, the sky, the air, creeping things, whatever those are, he created them, right? And he does it again and again and again. And at the end of every day of creating things, Scripture tells us that God saw how good it was. He creates some stuff, sits back, and then he sees how good it is. I actually have a quick story that goes with this. I was talking to Christian Bahr one day, our CSA president. Here you go. This is the man that's your president. Brace yourselves. And he said, Ryan, what do you think? What kind of day was God having when he created the snail? And I'm like, buddy, I'm going to need more than that. He's like, no, listen, you think he's just sitting around you know what? I created that slug over there. I got some time. It's only day 3. I'm going to create another one. I'm going to put a little shell on his back, a little temporary house just for him. Let him snail around. No one's going to know what he is. But I'm just going to do that. Boom. And he created it, and he saw how good it was. It was, in fact, awesome. That's Christian Bahr. And in all of this creating stuff, God found only one thing that was not good. And it was this. Adam was alone. God creates Adam. He puts him in the garden, and in the 2nd chapter of Genesis, we're told that it is not good for man to be alone. So what does God do? He creates Eve. And he sees that that is indeed very good. Literally from the beginning of time, the first thing in all of creation that we're told is not good is that we are by ourselves. We are not supposed to be that way. We're not supposed to just focus on me, the way that Adam was. That's a bad thing. And flash forward years and years and years, those same Pharisees, they came to Jesus and they said, okay, what's the second greatest commandment? And he said, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. That we're made for more than just me. Yet here we are tonight, and we're talking about a culture of me. The culture in which we're living. And it's a culture that I'm sure you've heard of. Our generation, sadly, is labeled Generation Me. A generation of selfies and always wanting the next best, newest thing, and having not the greatest communication skills, and just sometimes a lack of concern for the people around us. Of course, those things are not all bound to just our generation. It's very much the entire culture. Luckily, a man who has some influence in this world took notice of this culture. And he wrote an encyclical about it. In Laudato Si', Pope Francis calls us out for our own selfishness, and he urges us to care for all of creation. And he breaks down for us just how we got to be this way, saying that what's inside of each of us, my feelings, my emotions, my desires, those can actually cause me to sin in my behaviors against creation. As he described it, the violence present in our hearts wounded by sin is reflected in the sickness evident in the soil, the water, the air, and in all forms of life. So what's that mean? It means that my feelings, my impulses, what's inside of me, can have a tangible effect in the world. Let me give you a quick example. The other day, I walked out of my anatomy class. I had just taken 2 anatomy tests, and I was feeling like super tired, super stressed, because I just took 2 anatomy tests. So I came back here, I hopped in my car, and I drove to Wendy's. I got a Junior Frosty. Just me, myself, and I. Chocolate, because is there any other kind of Frosty? I wasn't hungry. I drove there to satisfy myself. Like, oddly enough, this happens all the time. I have a weird dependence on Wendy's Frosties of all things that pick me up when, like, anatomy is kicking my butt. So, I didn't need it, but I did it. And I formed a habit of this over time, of, like, this needless spending just to satisfy myself in those moments. I'll give you another example. Maybe you have had a fight or a falling out with someone who you love a whole lot. Friend, family member, boyfriend, girlfriend, and you don't like feeling bad about that relationship, so you hop in your car and you drive to the mall. And you go shopping for a couple hours. Buy some shirts, hang out, get your mind off everything that's going on. What Pope Francis is saying is that, like, what was inside of your heart when you were hurting has now made an impact on the world. And he says that when we act this way, the entire world is affected, that we ourselves are dust of the earth, and therefore we are connected with all of creation. For me, that's challenging to wrap my mind around, because whenever I act, or whenever I sin, I don't think about, like, the other person. It's like, that's between God and me, like what happened to our relationship. But what we're being told is that my sins affect everyone. And they do. Like, the encyclical makes that very clear. This culture of me in our country is wrecking the lives of the rest of God's creation. When I make a habit of buying those Frosties every time I'm feeling down about anatomy, which is every time I come out of anatomy, like, I throw the cup away on my way out the door, and it's got to wind up somewhere. When you have that falling out and you hop in your car and you go shopping just to get your mind off of it, like, eventually you do that enough, those clothes, they're going to pile up. They're going to be forgotten, wasted. And I don't mean to sound morbid with all this. I'm not coming down on everyone in this room like, never eat another Frosty, never buy a new shirt. That's not what we're talking about. I just want to tell you the truth. I want to tell you what Pope Francis is trying to tell us. And the truth is that our country struggles with a lot of these things in our culture. In fact, our country right now uses 5 times the natural resources the earth can sustainably provide us each year. That means that if the earth gives me 1,000 of something to use, we're using 5,000 of it every year. Luckily, that averages out to only about 1.5 times what the earth can provide on a global scale, because there are other countries who have so little, they help balance us out. But still a problem. We're still using way more than the earth is ready to give us. And we're still going to run out of it eventually. And beyond that, like, the stuff that we're using and throwing away, it winds up in some of those places. Some of the places around the world that we never see. And it ruins the life there. That includes the air and the water, and, as the encyclical makes very clear, people. Our brothers and sisters, who Genesis says deserve good. What I throw away doesn't disappear. It just becomes someone else's problem. And because of that, Pope Francis tells us that the earth is beginning to look more and more like an immense pile of filth. Those are bold words from the Pope. There are human beings who are literally living in our thrown away garbage. I actually heard a story about this for the first time when I was watching 60 Minutes a couple years ago. I'm that guy who lives alone in a church apartment and watches 60 Minutes on Sunday nights of his life. But they took their camera crew to a city called Cachoeira, Paraguay. It's a small community, and they list garbage as their only crop. I want to show you some of the pictures that they took there. So this is their actual town itself. You can keep going. We've got 4 of these pictures. These are people who are going out working, harvesting what they can during the day. This is their city. This is where they live. Luckily, this story had a bit of a silver lining. That's why they were doing a 60-minute story on it. These people actually depend on the garbage now for their own lives. So they go out, they harvest what they can, and they try to make new recycled items out of it. Specifically in Cachoeira, they make musical instruments. But small silver lining. They're clearly still living in a deep, deep poverty. And in my life, I don't know about you, but I've met some really awesome people who just can't believe that a God exists in this world when people live like that. Like when there are these many disparities, when there's this kind of poverty in the world, there are literally people living in garbage. God, where are you? I think that we often forget the role that we have in it. The throwaway culture that Pope Francis is describing has torn apart God's creation. Wanting to. So what do we do? I think in order to do anything, confront any sort of problem, you have to become aware that it in fact exists. So consider tonight your moment of awareness. This is what the Pope is trying to tell us. Become aware of the hurt in our hearts that is coming alive in our behaviors towards everything around us. Become aware of the sin that stems from trying to cover up or mask those temporary feelings that are unpleasant for us. Become aware of them so we can ask ourselves, how am I contributing to even a fraction of this? And in what ways can I begin to change? I know that's a lot coming at you in the first 13 minutes of a talk. And if you're anything like me, you know what, this is certainly a problem. This doesn't sound good. This doesn't look good. I don't want to be hurting other people who are part of God's creation, but I don't see this going on. I live in the United States. I'm here with you. I feel that same way. To me, all of this is overwhelming, and any change seems borderline unattainable. However, I think that while the culture of me does spill out into the entire world, its effects are right here in Columbia, Missouri. I think we're surrounded by the culture of me everywhere here. I see it all the time. Maybe you do too. I see the culture of me in my expectations to get the best grades at this university, to focus so heavily on my academics above all else that sometimes I neglect the needs of my family, my friends, my brothers that are staring me right in the face. I see the culture of me in the pressure to build a resume, in participating in things that honestly over the past 4 years sometimes I didn't really feel like doing, but they looked good on paper. Because I gotta be just a step ahead of the rest of the field here. I see the culture of me in my desire to, at the end of this all, land some high and mighty job that's gonna put bread on the table, whatever that means. And maybe even afford me the luxury to live in comfort for the rest of my life. I see it in the desire for me to have everything figured out right now. That I need to have all the answers because I don't want to wait even one more minute for God to reveal himself to me. I see it in the way that I approach my friendships sometimes. More concerned with what I have to tell someone, what I want them to hear from me, than with what they actually need from me as a friend who cares about it. I've seen the culture of me in some of my romantic relationships where I just want to focus on what I get out of this, my own pleasure from someone else, rather than having any sort of concern for their good. I see the culture of me every day when I walk outside on this campus. In the fact that a walk across Mizzou's campus, surrounded by 40,000 people, is ironically enough the loneliest part of my entire day. That when I'm walking to class and I see a stranger who I don't know, we both just adhere to this norm to look the other way or pull out our cell phones or pretend the other person doesn't exist because that's just what we've come to do. I think the focus on myself is everywhere on a college campus. And I don't mean to make it sound like college is a bad thing. College is not a bad thing. Mizzou, not a bad place. Awesome institution. God has called each of us to be a college student right now, to use our desires, our passions, our interests in order to pursue a career that is going to be able to serve others and serve Him. Again, the culture of me is about that obsession with myself. When I focus more heavily on what I want, what makes me feel comfortable rather than anyone else around me, and that is when a college campus can become really dangerous. Mother Teresa once called the Western world the most spiritually impoverished area in the world. I would never argue with Mother Teresa. I would expand on what she said, though, and offer that campuses here can be even more spiritually impoverished. The reality is that just college life promotes this culture of focusing on myself, of being the best, just a half step in front of the next guy, because I want my time, my energy, my stress, my long hours of doing homework in Ellis, all to be worth it when I someday graduate from this place. And for what? For what? Like for a job? For money? For things that, honestly, when I sit back and think about it, I'm not going to be able to take with me when it's all said and done. When we get wrapped up in all this, and I certainly have, I think we create a culture on campus that looks a lot like this. Maybe not physically covering people in garbage, but spiritually, socially, emotionally. While this culture leads to some serious financial poverty around the world, it also leads to deep forms of other poverties right here, as Mother Teresa pointed out to us. People wind up having to live their lives in garbage because their well-being is neglected by others. And I think there is a lot of that on a college campus. Just because we don't see it manifested like this doesn't mean it's not out there. I mean, you all have probably not ever seen a picture of Cachoeira, Paraguay until tonight, yet this place exists. Culture of me has some devastating implications across the world, and it's doing a lot of harm right here in our city. So really, what do we do? I don't want to leave you hanging on that, but I should say we'll have a talk on this next week about some concrete ways that we can go about responding to this issue. So tonight I'm just going to keep it real simple. I think the first thing we need to do is know that things can change. The idea that these problems are too big for us to do anything about is absolutely a lie. All of creation is connected. So, yeah, if I cannot legitimately care for the people around me on campus, then there's no way I'm going to be able to open my heart to the people all the way across the world. So I think what we've got to do is simple. I think I have to start with me. I have to start with myself, with what I can control, and then not look a whole lot further. You cannot pick up every piece of trash in Cachoeira, Paraguay. But you can have a role in being mindful of what you throw away and reducing what gets sent there and to other places around the world. You can't reach every single lonely person on Mizzou's campus, but you absolutely can approach each of them in a way that honors them as being a part of God's creation. In fact, the very term us does not need to refer to the entire world. The very term us just means more than myself. The culture of us that we're trying to move towards can mean two. That's what we're made for. Ask Adam and Eve. So start small. Start here. Start practical. Start by focusing honestly on just loving the person next to you. Because that's what Jesus did. And it's been my experience that Jesus tends to set a pretty solid example for us. Megan mentioned it in her adoration talk a couple weeks ago, that Jesus did not go out and heal every single person in the world. Jesus didn't even go out and meet every single person in the world. He could have, but he didn't. Instead, Jesus met people one-to-one. When a blind man greeted Jesus, he picked up clay, put it on the guy's eyes, and healed him. When a woman with hemorrhages reached out to touch Jesus' cloak, he stopped. He healed her, and then he sent her on her way. When death was staring Jesus in the face, he knelt at the feet of each apostle and washed that man's feet. And we are here now because of those one-to-one interactions of Jesus, about the example that he set for us. Think about that. Like, he did not radically fix loads of people the entire world over. Honestly, he began with 12. He began with 12 and then met some of the people in the crowds who came to him. And in only 2,000 years, which really isn't that long, we've moved from those original 12 to more than 2 billion people who have experienced this love. And it's all because of those one-to-one interactions over and over and over again. Another Mother Teresa quote for you, because why not? She could just give this whole talk. When she was confronted with all of the disparities in this world, she said, I can do small things with great love. I can do small things with great love. It's powerful. If I go and love the person next to me, and you just go and love the person next to you, and I think there are 91 of us here tonight, go out and love all of the people around us, one-to-one, some seriously awesome work is going to be accomplished. So, I know this was a lot. Take a breath. Take tonight as an opportunity to become more mindful of the impact that you have on all of God's creation, on the entire world, and do something about it. But start right here. Okay? Start small. Start with me. Because oddly enough, the culture of us depends on you. Amen? Amen.
Thank you, Ryan, for that talk. Right now, we're going to move into some small groups. We'll turn the lights on in a little bit. But no more than 5 people, please. We found that it's just a little bit easier to discuss when you have less than 10 or so. So 5 people, we're going to go for a little bit, and then we'll do some music and wrap it up. So